All right, I think we're going to go ahead and kick things off. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Dailey-Hebert, and I'm director of the Faculty Center for Innovation. I'm also a full professor in adult and organizational learning. And we also have with us James Nelson, who we are so thrilled to have. He is a pretty much resident expert in terms of AI as well. And so we're happy to have his insights to be part of this presentation and conversation today. And we're also excited to just kind of collectively unpack the impact that AI tools are having in higher education today. So we're going to be sharing some examples of AI, their uses, their limitations, and then also ways to think about them for your own use as well as for your learners. We're also going to provide examples for creating AI policies in your own class, free tutorials that are available for students, and how we can just kind of learn and grow in this space that is very much emerging. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and kick things off. We wanted to start by showing a clip from pop culture that a lot of times represents some of the sentiments related to AI use today. So this is just
there were some essays I'm very happy with. There was a really great essay from Clyde on the 1840s labor unions and their effect on the Industrial Revolution. Someone who never writes good essays, Butters, wrote an amazing piece on post-Cold War Poland and the changing provision of security. Feminist neoliberal perspective of post-war Afghanistan. By Eric Hartman. This week we have a new student to the Check Plus Club for an amazing essay called Writing a Policy About Improving the Rights of Migrant Workers. Let's hear it for Stan. It's just grading these stupid papers all the time. I have to read them all and comment on each one of them. Something's changed, and now a few of the kids are writing these really long, detailed essays.
Have you ever heard of ChatGPT? There's a few apps now, really. But see, it has AI and takes any subject matter and can instantly give you whatever kind of content you want.
There's an app that anyone can use that does all the thinking and writing for you?
Yeah.
Well, this is going to be amazing. I can use it to grade all my papers and no one will ever know.
So we just kind of wanted to share that. And then James is going to talk a little bit more. And we wanted to give you kind of a brief overview. I know ChatGPT is kind of the AI tool that everybody's talking about right now, but we also want to make you aware of others that are not just text generators, but there's also image generators and this type of thing. So James is going to just briefly kind of share some of the generative AIs out there and some examples of how it's being used in higher ed.
Thanks, Amber, and thanks everybody for having me here today. I think this is it's something that's really intrigued me for quite a while, and so I'm happy to be able to participate in this discussion. As Amber mentioned, there's a lot of buzz around ChatGPT specifically and Midjourney, if people have heard of that one. Those are kind of the big generative AIs. ChatGPT uses what's called large language models to write text, code, things like that. Midjourney is similar to something called Stable Diffusion, which you may have heard of, and that it's capable of creating art and images, photos, website layout designs, things like that. In addition to those, there are competitors. So Bard is Google's version of ChatGPT. It's fairly new. It was recently released to waitlist people a couple weeks ago. And it's significantly behind ChatGPT, but it's going to gain speed quick. It's Google. OpenAI, who does ChatGPT, also has a generative image tool, which is called DALL-E 2. We have that on there. Even beyond that, there's a lot. I mean, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of different generative AI on the verge of being released. There's tools that create videos, can identify within videos subjects and change those and transform those. One that recently opened to waitlist people for testing. You can record a video of yourself, and then you can go through and just select 3D rendered models, and it replaces you in your video with that 3D rendered model, which is pretty impressive. There's other things on the verge that are being tested that can take a photo and turn those into 3D models and things like that on the fly. So there is a lot coming in that space, and the next 6 months to a year really going to see a lot change. So those are just a few, and we've provided some examples here of ChatGPT, which I'm guessing many of you have seen. And then there's an example of a prompt and an image of Midjourney to kind of show you the quality of images that it can, photos that it can generate.
Thank you so much, James. We also just kind of wanted to unpack a little bit in terms of what it can do. So ChatGPT in particular, it can write customized resumes and cover letters. It can actually create original jokes, songs, and movie scripts. And one of the reasons we actually included that short video from South Park was because the creators of South Park actually used ChatGPT to create the script for their last episode of the season. For those of you who maybe watched the Holderness Family over, they created some videos over the pandemic. They've created one where they had ChatGPT, write a love song for his wife over Valentine's Day. So there's also, ChatGPT is able to do quite a bit in terms of creative functioning as well, which was not typical of AI in the past. It can also explain complex topics and summarize uploaded PDFs, legal briefs, etc. So for example, if I'm an instructor and I'm trying to decide on whether or not I want to include which of these two texts or different reports, and they're 200 pages long, I can also upload it into ChatGPT to summarize the key takeaways for me to help make that decision. ChatGPT is really great at writing, debugging, and explaining code. It can also create content in multiple languages. So for example, I've done work where I was working with faculty who only spoke Portuguese exclusively. And Google Translate could only do so much. There were some definite limitations there, whereas I can upload that now in ChatGPT, and it's much more fluid and closely aligned with those languages. And then it can also solve math problems step by step. I think there are some areas that it still needs work in this space, and they're building plugins to do that. But it does have some step-by-step processes. It can also give relationship advice or just be a chat companion if you're a little lonely. So those are some of the ways that ChatGPT is being used now. But we also want to share, some of the limitations and what you need to know. So for example, you can use this, but we highly recommend that you verify all results, because ChatGPT will also lie to you. And this is an important thing to know. So for example, if you put in something that does not exist, for example, you could put into ChatGPT, I would like to know, write an essay on how AI was used during World War II, which obviously did not exist. It will not only write you the essay, it will send you citations, verify facts, and that type of thing. So it will create and invent inaccurate information if there isn't any available. It also doesn't do math super well. I'm going to let James tell you about some of these other things that you need to be aware of in terms of the limitations of the AI, and then also the plugins that are being introduced to allow more functionality within that. Oh, I think you're muted, James.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, so one of the really eye-opening things of ChatGPT is as the quote says, any technology significantly advanced appears like magic. ChatGPT for many of us is that, in that it's amazing to see what it can do. And so you can be lulled into a false sense of security around its accuracy, right? So Amber mentioned, having it do the AI discussion about its effects on world wars and how that couldn't have possibly happened, but it'll make up a real citation, right? It'll say, it'll pick out a real author, it'll pick out a real journal, it'll make a title and even tell you what page it's on, but it's all garbage. It's just all made up, right? Because all ChatGPT is doing is calculating the next highest word based on the probability that it should follow. And so it's an eye-opening experience to actually run that kind of a test to see just how much it will lie. Amber also mentioned the math, right? It's gotten significantly better when you look at ChatGPT the way it was 2 months ago versus GPT-4, which has only been out for 2 or 3 weeks at this point. But it's still not great, right? So it, as an equivalent, they anticipated ChatGPT-3 was performing at essentially a 6th grade math level. The newest version, GPT-4, it got a 700 out of 800 on the SAT math score, as an example. So it's getting better. And again, the biased content, I mean, it is trained based on the information it's being fed. They're trying to control that by humans, but humans are fallible. And likewise, depending on what it could pick up, it can pick up offensive or biased content, which is very dangerous. And as you may have seen articles where people just continually ask it questions and it'll come out and suggest some pretty bad things. The other big thing that is an issue with ChatGPT that maybe some of the implementations of ChatGPT or its competitors have is that it's only fed up with content trained on content through 2021. So its knowledge is limited there. But one of the big advancements that OpenAI has announced in the last couple of weeks was the introduction of plugins, and these are not widely available yet, but they are releasing them to groups of groups of testers, essentially. And those plugins provide a myriad of capabilities. So one of them, as you see here listed first, is the ability to feed it any URL and have it go out and read that web page, get the information from it. You can now upload files into it, and based on what you want it to do for the file, it will create its own capabilities to do that with code interpreters. So as an example, in one of their demos, they uploaded an hour-long video file and asked ChatGPT to edit that file down to 30 seconds and then give them the file back. ChatGPT doesn't have that capability natively, so the ChatGPT itself wrote the Python code to do it and then executed it in a secure environment, pulled the file in, edited it, and spit it back out for the person to download. One of the other interesting use cases was data analysis. So they provided a CSV with tens of thousands of rows on music information. And then they asked ChatGPT to describe what the data contained, and it recognized just basically by going over the data what it was, and then to find important analytics from within that data. So ChatGPT created 3 different data models that went through, created all the graphs and charts to find interesting information. One of the key ones that stood out to me was that it identified a trend that music loudness was getting larger over a 10-year period. So each year it showed the average sound of music getting louder, which was pretty interesting just to pull that out of a simple data set. And it did that all through creating code right there and running it itself, which is pretty impressive. Another use case, which might be more real world, is they asked ChatGPT, and this is with more of the plugins, to find a restaurant. They're a vegetarian. They want a restaurant to eat on Saturday. On Sunday, they would like a recipe for a meal they could cook in-house at home, figure out how many calories that meal would be, and to order the ingredients for that meal. And so it was able to use the URL and internet plugin to go out and find a restaurant, provide locations in that person's area that had availability. It found a good recipe, used another plugin to calculate the calories for that meal and provided those back. And then it went to Instacart and loaded up a cart with all of the ingredients and provided a button within ChatGPT for the user to click and just pay and check out and have all those ingredients delivered. So you can see these plugins are dramatically changing ChatGPT's capabilities beyond just simple generative, the large language models. And they're going to open that up to many more locations, including anybody. So one of the big plugins allows you to plug your own knowledge base in to ChatGPT so that it can learn from your environment. And so this stuff is coming, and it's coming quickly. So there's a lot of positives and negatives with all of those things.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amber.
Yeah, thanks, James. And then we also want to tell you, in terms of thinking about AI in a general sense, what it looks like in terms of how you can use it in your professional practice, and then also ways that learners could potentially use it. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the ways you could potentially use it. And James is going to tell you a little bit about the ways the learners could use it as well. In terms of ways you can use it, part of this could even be to help assist you as you're going through a course development process. So let's say you're stuck, you know the topic that you want to have, but you're stuck on creating the outline for it. You can feed that question into ChatGPT, and it will spit out an outline that you can then take and customize, or at least help kind of get over that hump. It can also help with even just conducting research. So while ChatGPT lacks some of the critical functionality of Google and some other search engines, in terms of particularly making attributions that are easy to access, it can be a really useful starting point for conducting research. So a couple of examples might be in putting in your prompt, what topics should I research to better understand the philosophy of knowledge? Or another prompt might be, what are 5 peer-reviewed papers from 2020 or later on the limitations of large language models? And basically, I think one of the skill sets that we as faculty members need to learn is the art of prompt engineering, because that will directly impact the results that you get from these types of AI tools. And so we need to know how to use them effectively. As I mentioned, it can also help beat writer's block. So if you've ever experienced difficulty getting started on a writing project and you're looking at a blank page, depending on the source of your writer's block and what you're trying to achieve, you might be able to use ChatGPT to help kind of overcome that inertia or get your creativity flowing with some additional prompts. You can also kind of strengthen an existing piece of writing. So you could input an existing piece of text and could ask it to identify passive voice, repetitive phrases or words that are used, grammatical errors. So this could be particularly useful in terms of editing your own papers prior to research, scholarship submissions, that type of thing. Actually, some of the AI generation tools and some of the AI tools now are even helping with email management that will summarize your inbox and will also help create draft messages for you in your email that you can then again either send or customize and change. The custom image generation, which I think James talked about even with DALL-E and some other tools, is really so fantastic because you can use that for your courses, for the creation of images, particularly if you're developing an online class. So for example, I'm working with the Strategic Alliance in Africa, and I needed to have images that represented African-American military instructors who were using drones. It was a very specific image that I couldn't find anywhere else. And I was able to use AI generation to create it. And it was a wonderful image that I could use. And they did multiple for me. So even if there's something within your courses that you need a very specific image for, these types of AI tools can help create that. You also don't then have to worry about the copyright issues related to it either. I mentioned kind of supporting your research agenda in terms of filtering sources, or at least helping with topic outlines. Also just creating more engaging assignments for your students. So for example, I want to teach them how to use this tool. I want to teach them how to use AI, but also I want them to be very aware of the limitations that it has, because this is a tool that the workplace will be requiring them to use in the future. So even just helping have them do more engaging assignments. So for example, I teach a course on critical thinking. Well, this fall, I'm introducing a new assignment related to AI, where I ask them to invent something that didn't exist. I gave the example earlier of, tell me, the prompt would be, how was AI used during World War II? Well, I'm going to have my students create an unreal prompt that they then have to go through and analyze, well, which sources are fake, which ones are real, and then we'll have a conversation about that. So part of this is also just creating more opportunities for engagement and assignments with your students. You can also use this as a tool to help craft evaluation criteria for your rubrics. Let's say that this is what you're trying to measure. You can type that in as a prompt and it will give you evaluation criteria that you could use, modify, or at least consider. So those are just a few quick ways I wanted to cover. I'm going to have James tell you a little bit more about the ways learners can use this as well. Oh, you're muted. It happens to us all, James, at least
for a tech guy, I have more problems with the Zoom mute button than is I'm comfortable
It's
with.
that darn mute button. Yeah.
So yeah, this is an interesting topic, right? Because it presents an opportunity and a very big challenge for educators. Is how do you deal with student use when they can use this to generate and do so much work for them, from writing essays to helping them answer questions. And to Amber's point, I think really getting them to demonstrating for them how dangerous it can be if you don't use it responsibly is critical to at least setting a groundwork for students from that perspective. You know, when seeing for yourself that the output it's creating is basically garbage, it sets a mindset in the student that, oh, I do need to be more careful. And I also think the challenge isn't if, it's when. I guarantee you've all have students, and you're all, I'm sure, fully aware of this, that are already using it. It is become a social contagion of sorts. It is all over YouTube. It's all over TikTok, training how to use it, teaching people how to get around detectors, right? A lot of people might be familiar with ChatGPT. I believe it's ChatGPT 0, right? That can help detect if somebody's written something with ChatGPT or other generative tools. Unfortunately, there's tools beyond that to help get around that. So there's GPT -1 that's designed to thwart those. But beyond that, a student can actually train ChatGPT to write in their own voice if they know how to do it. So it becomes an extremely difficult thought to how to detect it. So focusing on how they can use it in a positive way is better, whether that's brainstorming ideas for a paper, finding legitimate sources where they can go feed more in there. I think one of the cooler things is being able to feed it your own paper and have it help you clean up maybe some of the grammar, or even quiz you on it, right? So one of the things I've seen people do effectively is use ChatGPT as a interviewer, right? So not just getting a job, but interviewing them about a subject or talking through it. And it's a great way to role play those kinds of scenarios. The other really interesting thing is when it comes to writing code, right? ChatGPT is very good in that space. It still faces the same kind of limitations with math when it's trying to do stuff, but it can help a student understand code that maybe they're not clear with, or if they're having a bug, it can help them identify where a bug in their code may exist. So there's a lot of really interesting and really cool ways that you can use it. But again, we face the very real challenge of how to do it effectively, where it doesn't interfere with their education.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And that's kind of the perfect segue that we wanted to make for this next section, which is considerations for creating an AI policy in your course. So regardless of how you feel about AI, whether you personally want to use it or not, your students are. And so it's really important to consider having a policy that will better reflect that use and what you consider acceptable or not. So in fact, Harvard just published this in February for considerations for creating a policy. And some of the recommendations are, these are the considerations to think about. Under what circumstances AI use is permitted and whether it's forbidden in your class. How students should cite or credit AI as they use it. And also just a warning about the technology's tendency toward hallucination, or that's the term that they're using within AI, which is deceptive data. So clear rules regarding students' accountability for that AI output, right? And we'll have all of this information, by the way, available following this. We'll share the PowerPoint and the recording of this on our FCI website. But so part of this is not just saying, well, this is acceptable to use AI, this is not, this is how I want you to cite it, but also just really clear rules to make the student accountable for what content they do use. Also, a notice about using AI ethically and responsibly. And then the last consideration is just discussion of the need to use AI as a tool to learn, not just to produce content. And so we wanted to share one of the policies, a sample policy of what this could look like, as well as student tutorials that go with it. So let me bring this up really briefly. Oops, excuse me. I'm just going to minimize this window. Are you guys able to see this on the screen? Okay, great. Thank you. So for example, an example policy could state, I expect you to use AI, e.g. ChatGPT, image generation tools in this class. In fact, some assignments will require it. Learning to use AI is an emerging skill, and I provide tutorials on how to use them. I'm happy to meet with you or help with these tools during office hours or after class. Be aware of the limits of ChatGPT, such as the following. If you provide minimum effort prompts, you will get low quality results. You will need to refine your prompts in order to get good outcomes. This will take work. Don't trust anything it says. If it gives you a number or a fact, assume it is wrong unless you either know the answer or can check it with another source. You will be responsible for any errors or omissions provided by the tool. It works best for topics you understand. Another point, AI is a tool, but one that you need to acknowledge using. Please include a paragraph at the end of any assignment that uses AI explaining what you used AI for and what prompts you used to get the results. Failure to do so is in violation of academic honesty policies. Be thoughtful about when you use the tool and make sure it's useful. Don't use it for inappropriate, or don't use it if it's inappropriate for use case or circumstances. Feel free to use this language. Again, this was posted in the Harvard Publishing, and so we'll share this link as well. But not only is this available, but also the tutorials for the learners are created here as well. All of this will be linked through FCI. So this is a practical guide that this instructor has created and that is open for you to utilize as well, that sets some parameters and tutorials to help students learn how to use this responsibly. So again, I just wanted to kind of show that sample policy, that it doesn't have to be a 15-page policy. This can be something very straightforward and simple for your students. And again, I would highly recommend linking out to tutorials that already exist if they are covering the topic and the content that you want them to. Is there anything else you want to add on here, James, before we go to some of the takeaways?
I did want to kind of flip back to what when we were talking about student use case, because there was something I wanted to mention that relates to this, and that is how Microsoft and Google are using it, right? Microsoft has made a massive investment in OpenAI, who created ChatGPT. Google themselves are making a big investment. Both of those companies, right, provide pretty much all of our communication and business productivity software in the United States. Each one of those is incorporating their version. So Microsoft is using ChatGPT specifically, Google is using Bard into almost every one of their tools. So Amber mentioned how it will be implemented in Outlook, where it will provide you a synopsis of a big email thread that maybe you haven't read yet. It'll give you a quick synopsis of the conversation so you don't have to read everything. It will provide you a sample reply right there with a click, right? They're doing it in Word. So as you're typing in Word or in Google's version of that, it will suggest the next sentences, the next paragraph for you. In Excel and Google Sheets, it can be used to create formulas, to do the analysis of data in the Excel sheets. Even in PowerPoint, Microsoft did a demo of theirs where it generated an entire PowerPoint with just a small prompt on what they wanted to talk about. That included all images, the notes for the slides, everything. So you can imagine as that stuff becomes more available, and it is available today, but it's only they started it with large corporations. They have a handful each one is working with. So that becomes more widely available. It'll be harder for people to even tell when AI is being used, right? They may just see within Word, hey, here's a suggested paragraph. Sounds good to me. I'm going to use it. And that was ChatGPT doing their work for them. So as you look into the future, when you consider policies and the other, be aware that these things are coming, and we probably won't have too much control in it, right? So it'll be part of the tools that they're using every day to complete these assignments and do the work. And that presents a very real challenge beyond just, academic integrity, right? So, thanks.
Thank you. Well, and we also want to make sure we have plenty of time for open discussion, questions, considerations, as well as how you guys have or may be thinking about using it. But we also wanted to just kind of summarize some of the main takeaways. So 1, learn how to use AI and how to use it effectively. Again, that skill set of prompt engineering is going to be even more critical to being able to use these tools effectively and to teach your students how to use them effectively. So you want to develop that skill set of prompt engineering. We also want to teach our learners about the benefits and limitations of such tools. As James had mentioned, if they are required to do that assignment, or if your policy within your syllabus states that they are accountable and need to cite anytime they're using ChatGPT or AI functionality, that creates a different level of accountability, expectations, as well as them being able to really understand the optimal way to use the tools and not how to abuse it. We also want to explore such tools with our students to co-create and problem solve together. So have an interactive and engaging activity in which they can create it using AI as well. And like I mentioned, prompt engineering matters. The more detailed, the more specific the prompt, the better the results. And James and I were even talking about this as we were preparing for this presentation of just, it's very easy to fear the unknown. It's very easy to say, oh, this is this AI tool. Everybody's going to plagiarize. Everybody's going to abuse it. It's a terrible thing. When the reality is, it's just another tool that as faculty, we probably need to learn how to use. Whether you want to use it in your practice or not is one thing, but again, ways to integrate policies so students know what to expect and what you expect of them regarding that use is really important. And it's also understand that this is a skill multiplier, not a replacement. I've heard faculty say, oh, well, it can generate PowerPoints now and respond to my emails for me. I'm not going to have a job in 10 years. That's really not the case. This is meant to be a skill multiplier, meaning that it can make my work easier for me. So only I can do the human intensive skills that take out some of those laborious tasks. So maybe instead of spending hours searching, I can create a cited list of resources that I might want to integrate that I can easily verify and find on my own that would take me less time than if I did another search. Also, as James mentioned, AI is here to stay. It's going to be everywhere and quickly. And we're seeing that even in how quickly it's rolled out, not just from ChatGPT, but all of the other generator tools as well for AI. So these are just some things to think about and some really quick takeaways. But at the end of the day, I think, we have to acknowledge that AI isn't perfect, that we aren't perfect either, but that the power of combining the two can be infinitely better when used wisely. And so with that, we kind of want to open it. Let's chat. Let's open it up to questions, discussions, ways that you have used or are thinking about using it, limitations you see, what we can learn from each other in this space.